All right. So yesterday I was reading a link on X, and it was Elon Musk talking about the AI and robotics supersonic tsunami coming in, and the change is going to kind of happen slow, and then all of a sudden at once. So this stuff is like compounding. So I mean, we don't really know what's going to play out here. That's you look at AI right now, and we can do some basic programming. We can create some images, and we can all tell, or getting it's getting harder to tell when something's an AI fake, like a video or a picture. Um, so it is growing fast, but pretty soon we'll hit this compounding return on it. So then play that scenario out, and then we kind of go into imagination. I don't have a crystal ball or anything. So I sat up last night and started thinking about how this plays out. And I've been doing this for a while. I'm in Minnesota, so there's been absolute chaos for a whole month here. And I'm reanalyzing what I'm doing with my career, what I'm doing living here, what I'm doing investing here. Do I need to reposition myself? All those kind of questions have been playing out. And then this one kind of hit me from a different angle. And I was like, I have to rethink everything. So that's kind of what this video is about. So Elon Musk talks about AI and robotics will combine, and there'll be like the supersonic tsunami. It's like a sudden wave of abundance. And he says, where goods, services, and labor get insanely cheap or free. He says by 2030, we'll have more humanoid robots than people. AI smarter than all humans combined, and traditional jobs, especially white collar, gone first. Okay, so that's fear. Like, where do all our jobs go, and what will we do? And then what will we do for money if we don't have jobs, and how do we buy things? Well, it's kind of twofold as this stuff starts to happen. So as AI comes in, and you get, let's just say the Tesla bot, or other companies are going to produce bots too, and they're going to start replacing white collar, because white collar can be done with mainly software. The physical world with robots will be conquered with AI and robotics, but that's going to take a little bit longer. So then we'll have a deflation, a massive wave of deflation, and that's going to create opportunity where everything's going to be much cheaper. So maybe we don't need to save as much for retirement, because we're going to have all these goods and services produced at such low expense. But we still will need money. So we'll need some basic money. And then, so let me get focused here. I made some notes. So prices collapse, near zero marginal cost for manufacturing. So the only cost that would go into like manufacturing would be like the physical materials and the power, right? So you drastically reduce the labor. So let's just say you knock down cost by 50 to 80% on everything. You're going to be able to do distribution much more effectively, as self-driving trucks, and everything else is going to get streamlined. And what's happening right now with the programming is, they created this AI, and AI was, recreating the programming language and saying, okay, here's your code snippet, here's your code snippet. But now AI has actually stepped beyond that, and it writes its own binary code now. So it just says it avoided an extra step, and it just streamlined to go to the outcome. So everything we look at, we understand as a human. AI is going to find a faster way, more efficient way to do it. So a lot of this stuff we can't predict. And I think that's what Elon is basing a lot of his theories on, is AI is going to find a faster and cheaper way to do it. And everything we know will change. Like, we used to think of programming in the programming language, and then all of a sudden AI just creates its own binary language, which is much more efficient, and creates the same program, but much faster and efficient. So everything's going to get better. Hopefully. It could get worse too. We don't know where this goes. So the white collar jobs are supposed to disappear first, and then physical jobs. So when you combine the AI, the software, into robots, the robots can handle the physical world. And now you have the intelligence of AI within this robot that can handle the physical world. And then that, as stuff gets cheaper, the debt shrinks in real terms, but your savings, cash, lose power. So then you start getting into monetary policy, and this is kind of where it gets weird. As the fiat weakens, right? The US dollar weakens. Scarcity becomes the new wealth. So what is going to be scarce in the future, right? So money, or we think as scarcity, money is just a trade of time. So you work, you save your time, in form of money to trade it for someone else's time. That's really all money has been doing. But now suddenly that time just deflates, right? You have these robots that you can buy for 20 or 30,000. That's gonna shrink that cost of that labor by what, 2, 3, 4, or 5 bucks an hour instead of 50 or 60 an hour. So that's not as scarce because then you can reproduce these multitude, so instead of one robot, you might have 10 robots, and then you compound that from $5 down to $1 an hour kind of thing. So what is the new scarcity? That becomes the new scarcity is the new wealth. That's the land, and then the electricity, which you need to produce and keep the AI running, and the data, like the chips and that kind of stuff. And then experiences, life experiences become valuable. So we go from what we understand as wealth, and suddenly that wealth is kind of goes into the scarcity stuff, which is land, electricity, compute, the chips and everything, and then personal experiences. So if we start looking at it from that standpoint, we have to relook at what we're doing for work and what kind of value we're bringing to other people, and what value we bring to ourselves and our lifestyle. So to bridge this transition, the discussion of that universal basic income, they'll call it universal high income, because they got to sell it. That universal basic income is a hard thing to grasp right now. So they call it universal high income. It's not basic survival, but shared productivity, dividends. So people work on passion, not necessity. So I'm not sure how they're going to equate that, but they're going to have to play with somehow to give some basic income, so we don't have a total of this ultra wealth that owns all the computing and the AI and technology and the production, and then this lower class that are the serfs, that really have no value to bring. They're going to have to share somehow in that. So that's kind of what the discussions have been around that UHI or UBI. So the timeline that they're projecting on this one is this year to next year. It's going to be kind of that early chaos phase. The Optimus pilots in factories. So Optimus 3, I think it is. Version 3 is in production right now. And that's going to do repetitive tasks, like good for factory workers, sorting items, right? Nothing too complex, but just it can work, all day long, whatever. You keep it charged, keep it plugged in, and, it can just keep doing the repetitive task. Not a lot of brain power, not a lot of thinking, but it'll replace that kind of income. And then, so then we get into 2027. That's when the sales start to happen on that. Excuse me. So the job losses will accelerate at that point. And then 2028 to 2035, prices are going to start to tank hard. Universal high income, the urban rentals soften. Excuse me. Watching a cat for my niece. Anyhow, so 2028, the prices tank hard. Universal high income pilots everywhere. So the urban rentals soften. Nature lifestyle properties boom. So this is where we got to rethink things. So if you right now, everything's based on location for investment and where you live, right? So most people are going to live where the jobs are. So now if the jobs start changing, where you live doesn't matter, right? Why would you live in Minnesota, let's say, because that's where I'm from, right? We live here because we have super low taxes and a beautiful climate. No, that's we have horrible weather. We have we have Arctic 30, 40 below weather, and then we get super hot in the summer. So we go to extremes on the weather. And generally speaking, we have some of the best summers in the world, but it's not a friendly environment to live in. It's a very hostile environment, cold and uncomfortable. So we don't live here for the climate, and we don't live here because the taxes are cheap. It's some of the most expensive taxes in the country. So why do we live here? We live here because the jobs are here. We had is past tense. We had some of the best Fortune 500 companies located right here in the Twin Cities. You have Cargill, which isn't Fortune 500 because it's privately owned. You had General Mills, Pillsbury, all the flour companies that have then merged. And then you had Best Buy, you have Target, you have, all the medical device industries. I mean, and then we have United Health Group, and I mean, just massive amounts of per capita, these Fortune 500 companies, plus a lot of diverse income, right? Not diverse income, but diverse fields. So the job opportunities were great here. And as the taxes and the environment gets more and more less business friendly, these jobs start moving out. 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, started here. It started up in northern Minnesota around the mines, and it evolved into the empire that it is today. Honeywell is another company that started here and still is here. So that's why Minnesota became a powerhouse, and we were connected to the coast because of a guy named James J. Hill, who built this railroad that connected the West Coast to Minneapolis out to New York, so we could move all our food products to the world supply. So that's why the food industry became big here. Plus we have rich, fertile land. So that whole thing changes, right? Because the jobs aren't here anymore, because you're going to have AI and robotics change that all. So then why do you live here? So then we got to rethink that. Where are you going to move? Let's say I don't need to work anymore. I have this universal high income. Where am I going to live? I don't need to be stuck where I'm at, right? I'm stuck here because it's a normalcy bias at this point where I'm comfortable here. So change is hard, right? It's here's a story of compared to the animal world. Chickens. I got some chickens in the backyard, right? Raised my own eggs, and I get well, it was not a ferret, but a possum got into the chicken coop. Chickens are freaking out, screaming, blah blah blah, and they run outside and they're in the little pen. And I open up the chicken coop, and there's this possum in there, freaking vicious teeth, and I'm trying to get it out. And then one of the chickens just walks in, and it's her normalcy bias. Oh, this is where I roost at night. So there's this vicious possum in there that's ready to kill her. But she just goes back to her normalcy bias and, goes into her coop. We go with what we're comfortable with. So I don't think this is going to happen all at once, because it's going to take a while, and people have family and roots, so you don't move away from your grandkids. You don't move away from your grandparents. I got elderly father. I can't just move, right? I got to be around and take care of him in his old age. So people just don't move out all at once. But where we live in the city is going to change, right? Do you need to be close to work? Probably not. You're probably not going to be working. You're going to get this universal high income or universal basic income, and the cost of goods and services is going to be super cheap. And the value of money, deflates. And so you don't need as much money for retirement in theory, right? You might get a couple of these robots to help you around the house, and you can kind of pursue more of a leisurely thing. So let's just say everything goes beautifully and everyone is wired perfectly, and they pursue good things instead of bad things, and stay away from the drugs and alcohol and fighting each other, that kind of thing, and they pursue worthy pursuits. Then this could look like nirvana. It's not going to go that smooth, right? There's human nature, right? You're going to get a certain percentage that are just going to be destructive. So you go into that. Where do you then live close to your family? You're going to start relocating outside of the metro. You're going to try to get something like comfortable on a lake, on some acreage, some land, a little breathing space. Maybe you start moving back into these rural towns, right? You don't need the jobs, and you can buy this beautiful house for pennies now, right? These old, beautiful houses in these small towns, and you can live very comfortably there now, So suddenly housing becomes super cheap. But then what does that do to my real estate investments? Well, those tank too. I got a freaking cat going nuts here. So then I have all my rental strategy based on school district. Okay. And, location, location, location. I've been preaching that for a long time. So I invest into great school districts because I'm going to get a ready supply of renters, through whatever. They're just going to want the school district, that location. And then that's gone. Why do you need an education? Why do you need schools at this point? I mean, you're going to want to get educated, but you don't need the traditional schools because you're going to have this Optimus robot or this AI that's going to probably be more effective at teaching than, your traditional public education. So now the school district isn't as valuable. So this portfolio I built up, and we're talking the timeline. What did he say in my notes here? 2028 to 2035. So let's just call it 2030. Right. I got like 4 years and prices are going to start to tank potentially. So does my portfolio suddenly become lower value? Well, probably not to zero, right? But it's not going to be as valuable as I was anticipating, right? The whole strategy has changed. And then, I'll share this one too. So if you look at this, this way, I created this on AI, and that's the physical world. You have AI put into these robots that can pretty much be trained to do any task. And then you add this one. Okay, so now you have commercial real estate. I'll turn the volume down on this one. And what do you do with all that office space? They probably go into vertical farming, and you have Tesla bots, growing food production. Now the price of food's going to drop because they're going to become efficient at it. You still have to heat the buildings and, run the lights and stuff. And that's the value. It's going to be charging the Tesla robot. It's going to be running the lights to grow the food. That's the real scarcity. That's the value. So, I got to rethink everything. That location and what you own changes. People can live anywhere now. It's going to be worse than it was when you could do remote work. Now you don't have to work at all. Now you can really live anywhere and you still get your basic income. So 2035 plus, he's calling it full abundance. Money signals, status experiences, not survival. GDP becomes meaningless because the metrics you use to measure GDP won't matter anymore. It's going to need new metrics to, energy or happiness somehow to measure the GDP. So everything we kind of know is kind of turning into it's changing. And then, so how do you adapt in this changing world, right? So we kind of covered a little bit on it. Maybe if you got some commercial properties, you can start to pivot and use that for, growing food, growing whatever, or, storage, or adapt it, maybe housing, but, is that going to be the housing people want, that kind of thing. And then you get into the principle of location still matters, but the location changes. So like I said, the school district doesn't matter. You're going to go out to the lakes. You're going to go out to the ocean front. You're going to go out to where the climate's warm, maybe. Do you stay within the country? Are you free to go anywhere in the world? This is probably going to be a worldwide explosion. Probably not by 2035, but eventually it will be. So the urban and suburban rental school districts, they become risky investments at this point, because we're close to things changing. Education loses value. AI tutors. It's going to change, and it's where do you go? You want cash flow. That's my investment strategy. You want cash flow. There's still going to be rich and poor, right? There's still going to be people that are going to have more than others. And it's going to be how we prepare right now on where you're going to be in that future is kind of what I'm thinking. And I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just kind of running through what we do know now, and things are going to change. But what do you invest in? you want cash flow. The bots will slash your maintenance costs. The good rentals you'll want to keep, but maybe I start shifting over to rentals that are going to be, people will want to live in, sit by a lake, sit by, oceanfront, that kind of thing. Maybe some land, I can rent that. Um, More of life experiences versus location that we generally think of as good location based on schools or based on jobs. And then the other scarcity thing is land with utility. So we talked about that, the waterfront, rural acreage. There's a fixed supply of that stuff. Beauty, that's scarcity. You could do like cabins, you could do VRBOs, resorts, that kind of stuff. Energy assets. So, if you got, I've got to look into this, but I was kind of not a big fan of solar power, but when you have this much demand on the electrical grid as this technology comes about, everyone's got a one or two, three, four Tesla robots or whatever robot it is that needs to be charged. Maybe their car needs to be charged. Certainly they're using more computers and AI, and the data centers are going to suck massive amounts of electricity. So our grid is going to be strained. Do you add some solar panels to your house? And then some battery banks so you can store some of that electricity to charge your stuff for necessity. And then you can resell that electricity to other people. That seems like a better investment than rentals right now, if this world changes like it does. So maybe the investment is buying solar panels for your house and rental properties, adding solar chargers to your rentals to make them more attractive as everything starts to change. And then maybe you invest into solar panel farms, windmills. And I'm not a big, renewable energy fan. I would rather do something more productive like nuclear or coal to generate, more efficient energy. But I can't achieve that scale. That's going to require a lot of capital that I don't have. So then you start looking at, well, what do I have? What can I work with? A few solar panels, that probably starts to make sense now. And I think the paybacks, I looked at that and I think it was like 10 years to pay that off. And then I think there's some cheap loans on it. So I kind of ran some numbers here. So let's say you were to buy, or I said, okay, if I were to buy a 10-acre, solar farm, it'd be about 900 to $1 million to put that up, not including the land, right? I don't know what I can get the land for. I've got some land, maybe I can put it on there, but so potentially that could run about 260,000 a year net at the current rates. But the current rates are like 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And let's just say they explode to $1 a kilowatt hour by 2030, 2035. So now my initial investment of that 900 to $1 million for the solar panel farm explodes by, we'll just say its return 4 times. So that could be a good investment because I do think we're going to use a lot more electricity. So that's a 5-year return. You could triple your money, maybe. It depends. But then, you don't know where this technology goes because AI can come step in and say, here's a more efficient way to do it, like they did with the computing, and just create their own binary language. So maybe like Elon's talking about, the most efficient way to do data centers is up in space where you get solar panels, much more efficient. And then you have cooling already built in because you don't need all the water to cool it. So, and then all you got to do is wirelessly send the data back to Earth. So maybe it's not going to consume as much electricity as we think if they're able to do that. Or if they talk about these portable, nuclear reactors that, small power plants that these data centers can use. Probably not going to be set up for home use, but if it does, I'd love to have one. And then, so I looked into that a little bit. So that seems to be fairly profitable with a potential big upside. And then it recommends stay within a mile of a distribution line. It depends how much you're producing. So, you need the 3-phase, you're kind of your typical line running through a neighborhood. If you get into like 50, 60, 80 acre solar farms, then you're going to have to get closer to substations, and it's going to get more complicated. But there's a way to scale this stuff too. And then that solar panel has gotten better since I have been negative on it. They do have the new type, I think it's called Type N, that will actually pick up reflective snow and will actually work in the snow communities like I live in. So, and then how do you adapt to this early? So we're looking at 2027, maybe next year. The first wave of the Tesla robots are going to come out, and they're going to start out slow, right? They're going to be kind of basic coverage. It's going to, the remedial tasks they're going to be able to do, go in, clean toilets, clean bathrooms, work in the factories kind of thing. And then once they're able to, because right now AI is building fast online, it's getting smarter and smarter every day. And that just plugs into the robots at some point. And then you can train it to do your tasks like the construction I showed the video of, or the gardening, vertical farming in office buildings. So it's going to compound at some point. This timeline might be compressed, but I do believe we get there. So how do you do that? So get ready to invest is kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe the first wave of robots, wait on that one, and then the second generation get into. So the Tesla 3 may not be a good investment, but the one after that might be. So then I can train it to maintain some of my rentals. I can train it to do some of those tasks, train it to do some construction, fixing up, flipping houses. We go back to this, and okay, so I can train it on how to flip a house. So I'm not hiring crews, or I'm not doing all the work myself. I may have 2 to 4 of these, and not everyone's going to be able to get one of these right away. You invest 120,000 into 4 of these, let's say, and you can start to produce housing much cheaper. Now that's not going to be long lived, because there's going to be more efficient ways. The AI is going to figure out more efficient ways to produce housing. But it is a way to early adopt and get these things paid off and start to learn. And then you can do the cleaning, remodeling, flips, demo paint, stage faster, rental maintenance, clean repair, and then you can also rent them out. So let's just say you get 4 of these. Maybe you can start renting them out. You get some solar panels to help you charge them. You can sell the electricity back to the grid. Maybe that's going to pay off longer term than the traditional residential rental property. Possibly. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just theorizing right now based on the information we have. So what do you kind of build from? So the diversify skills, they're recommending like master bot prompting maintenance. So you're going to need a human interface at some point to train these robots in, to maintain them, make sure they're running right, tune them up, the kind of thing, that typical mechanic kind of stuff. You're going to need that certainly in the beginning stages. Maybe at some point that even the AI bots take over that, the robots take that over. And then what becomes valuable is when people have more time and they have the income and everything's cheaper, experiences become more valuable. The resort business, the hotel business, the getaways, the retreats, the lake, the ocean front, the riverfront, the mountains, those experiences become much more valuable, and people are able to do those. And then I just lost all my notes here. Bear with me. Here we go. The other thing it recommended is Tesla stock, Bitcoin, digital scarcity, water rights, climate. Okay, so that's something else we didn't really talk about. Let's talk about water rights, right? So that's scarcity, that water, the resources, your mineral rights, your timber. You still need the raw materials for the goods and services. People still need housing. People still need the goods and services. They still need the food. So your ag land is valuable. Some of that vertical farming and commercial office buildings might change some of the what you're producing on the ag land. But certainly you're going to need massive amounts of copper. You're going to need massive amounts of lithium and iron and coal, probably coal too for electricity. So all these mineral rights become more and more valuable. So if you can get into some mineral rights, I know it's pretty tough in Minnesota. We have a ton of minerals, but those mineral rights have been traded off and sold. Like I've got a bunch of land up there, but there's no mineral rights that come with it. That was sold off years ago, back in the 1800s. And so if they want to access the mineral rights under my property, they're going to have to buy me out, to get under there. But I don't have those mineral rights. So if they discovered a gold mine underneath me, I can't access that. But if they want to mine that gold and need access to get to it for my property, they're going to have to pay me to access it. So, you can try to get into some mineral rights that way. I know Elon bought a bunch of mineral rights up in northern Minnesota. Whether he's able to ever mine it, I don't know. In this current political climate here, he's never going to be able to get to those mining rights. But we have them. I mean, we have the minerals here. So that's another angle. Those natural resources are more and more valuable. And maybe you get out to like North Dakota, you got the Bakken oil fields. That oil is valuable. The natural gas that's coming out of there can produce cheap electricity. So all North Dakota has to do is throw up a bunch of natural gas power plants. Boom. Data centers everywhere, right? It's there's going to be massive changes coming out. So, you could try to get out on the forefront on that and kind of watch that, or just invest into someone else's company that's ahead on this, and into the mining, into the natural resources, into the electric production, or the chip manufacturing. Bitcoin, I don't know where Bitcoin goes. That's just a gamble. I got some, I'll throw some at it. If it goes to zero, oh well. If it goes to, $1 million a coin, great. It's not going to destroy my life. It's not going to, I don't have enough to where it's like hitting a jackpot either. So, downside. So let's just say it doesn't go all, we talked about kind of all the positive sides in this. So let's just say one of these tech companies, or, a foreign nation, develops this, and the distribution is not shared, and it just becomes like these massive oligarchs, and everyone else is in poverty. We become the serfs. That could happen. It depends who wins this tech race. My bet is still on Tesla. I still think they're going to do it. So you'll have the massive deflation, and maybe not the universal basic income. I think you will. I think even if you're a tyrant dictator, you're going to want a universal basic income. You're going to want to feed the population, bread and circuses to keep them, happy. You can't let them go into total poverty. So they feed us more of the Netflix and NFL, and everyone's happy and dumb. So that's kind of the worst case, as we become more of that society. And then also, when you have idle time on your hands, will people take to drugs and alcohol? Yes, there's going to be a percentage of the population that does that. Are they going to be prone to fights and violence? Yes, there's going to be a percentage of the population that does that. Can that be handled? Yes. So there are some negative impacts to having too much free time. You always hear about the kid that's born into ultimate wealth, and he ends up with a silver spoon up his nose, right? It's just that idle time can create big problems in a person's life. So that would be kind of the negative side to this. But if we can somehow get to focusing in on productivity on another level, that kind of thing, it may be good. So the mindset, that was the other notes I kind of took, is we don't hoard cash anymore because it's deflating. So, saving stops becoming worthwhile. We're not the whole capital to save capital to do something. That whole thing kind of changes because the value of the dollar deflates. Focus on real assets, human stories. Work becomes optional. You kind of chase meaning. So if you can chase meaning and focus on the positive, we're probably set up for, some good changes. It's not doom. I mean, this is an opportunity. I'm just kind of thinking, how do I prepare for this, right? I'm about as prepared as anyone else, right? I don't know how this is going to play out. I just started, theorizing on it last night, is ask some questions into AI and get some responses. and just kind of theorize on the best strategies. And right now I'm leaning towards some solar panels, not throwing everything I have into it at this point. But maybe I'll sell some of my rentals and go do a small 5 acre solar panel farm, you know, or relocate a little bit, get some rentals into something that might be considered more desirable, like a lake or rural setting or mountains, and I can probably cash flow it now with like a VRBO or something like that until the whole switch changes. So it'd be kind of low risk. Right now I don't think we have enough information to say move everything off of all your chips off of this and put it into here. We don't have enough information right now. We're just speculating. So that's kind of what I wanted to share. Looks like I got a lot of comments on here, which I will go through. All right. So Robert's homeschool pods will be the norm for schooling. Ann McCaffrey, who's Ann McCaffrey? Talked about it in her Rowan series. Public school will be 1 day a week, remote otherwise. Okay, so yeah, so the school districts will start to become less relevant. So yep, and then let's see if there was more to that. Yep, no, that was the full amount. Okay, and then we have noticed that reasonably priced fixer-uppers sell quickly. Homeschool time channel name, yet YouTube stopped displaying it months ago. Okay, I'm not sure. So there must have been a YouTube channel called Homeschool Time. I do think homeschool is real popular still. I'm kind of, past the age of the kids, so I'm not as close to that. I know anecdotally, yeah, step back a minute. The low price fixer uppers do sell quickly. Funny story, we had one and hit the market, and I'm like, this is going to go fast. And the buyer's like, yeah, he's been watching the market. He's really in tune with the market. And they had 40 showings in a day and a half, and I think we were one of 5 offers in just a day and a half. So yeah, the low price stuff is still in hot demand and sells quickly. And then we'll go back to you're talking about homeschooling, and that I do think is picking up. I forgot what I was going to say about the homeschooling. Oh, the anecdote. So, I sell real estate, and buyers moving in, looking at moving into the Twin Cities. And then that's when January, all the freaking chaos, the protesters came in from out of state, and there are a lot of Minnesota women there too. But, and then he started thinking again, and this is like I don't know, $2 million house, and he's got kids, and he's just like, he walks from the deal. He's like, I can't do it. He goes, the Minnesota schools have turned to absolute garbage. And he goes, even the private schools have turned to woke garbage. So he's not moving to Minnesota. So you compound that to, and that's anecdote, right? That's one story. But I suspect there's a lot more behind that. There's people that don't even get to that stage that just rule Minnesota out before they even come. So the location, the value, the structure is changing. It's kind of been changing for a while, and it has to do with a lot of politics, a lot with work. That kind of the whole shift on location has changed. And I grew up where we had one of the best education systems in the country, and now we're like middle of the pack to lower of the pack now. And so now we're at like top of the high taxes, and we used to be one of the most affordable housing markets in the country. And that wasn't that long ago. That was in the early 90s. We're like the most affordable home market in the country. And then now we're one of the most expensive because of our land use policies. Okay, so moving on. Respectfully and seriously, or we could use less electricity. Reading a book, camping, hiking, picnic outdoors takes no juice and is fun. That's true. So that's a worthy pursuit. So if you, that's kind of, you go into the drugs and alcohol route and the, fighting, and there'll be people that do that. But on the same token, like you're saying, as people are going to choose to get back to nature, they're going to choose to reconnect with the roots of, there's something about being in nature, hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, connecting back to the basics. So I do think we'll see a lot of that, but we'll still need the electricity because people will still use AI, and the products they consume will be AI. But yeah, you're right. Some people will use less electricity, because of what the pursuits they choose. And then Roberts adds, been pricing some home modular setups for my place and are looking around 6,000 to 7,000 in equipment, not including installation. 3,500 kilowatt per hour, 10-year life cycle, self-install books, highly affordable. Okay, so I thought it was a 10-year payback. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it's a 10-year life cycle. I thought it was like a 20 to 30-year life cycle with a 10-year payback. I might have misunderstood that. I have not spent a lot of time researching that. I do think it's worth the time to, like Roberts is saying, investigate that and look that up. And it might be worth investing in at some point. I do think electricity is going to go up in price substantially. So even if all you get out of it is you offset some of your electrical use, and you can, charge some of your equipment or run some of your lights and refrigerator, and you don't jump from 20 cents a kilowatt hour up to $1 or $1.50 per kilowatt hour in the next 4 years, it's going to be worth the investment. That payback time is going to shrink fast if rates do what they do. I don't have a crystal ball, but I suspect on the trajectory, that's where we're going. All right, keep hitting the wrong button here. Okay. So then we have 1439315. I don't know your name. Sorry. After it's built, cities still tax the heck out of you and still have high utility rates. Understand maybe lower price costs on house, yet still paying higher and everything else. You're right. That's going to be that location. Where do you choose to live? Do you live in that high tax state? Do you live in that high tax city? The county that's going to tax you, that school district. Are they going to just get rid of that mill rate on your property taxes, or do they keep that in place as a, revenue to pay for that universal basic income? So absolutely, the cost of living is still going to be a factor on where do you choose to live. Do you go to I don't know, trying to think, like Thailand is the exchange rate's super affordable. It's got some beautiful land there. Do you go down there and live on a beach, right? So those are real considerations. That location, that formula has changed on everything I've built. Has been location near jobs, location near the good jobs, location near the good schools. That's where the people wanted to be. That's where the rentals were going to be. And that's where the real estate values were going to hold the best. But now if this super tsunami that they're talking with AI and robotics comes in, that whole equation just got blown up. That job being in that good location near the jobs, being in Minnesota, Minneapolis, in the high tax, cold climate, because the good jobs are here, that's gone. If this sits, right? It's not going to happen overnight, but at some point, the stacks, and then it just happens all at once. How did you go broke? Well, it was slowly, then all at once, right? If you ignore the stuff, and then it all collapses. So that's kind of the way I see this AI and tech. So, you're right. People are going to move where it's affordable and where you have a good lifestyle, and back to like the hiking and the camping. People are going to want to get back to nature. They're going to want the peace, the quiet. They're going to want the life experiences. They'll still want to be by family. So it's not easy to relocate right away. If you're a younger person, that's going to be easier to relocate. So if you're young, maybe you start thinking about, hey, do this. And then, at my age, it's like, well, crap, I just freaking worked a lot of hours and a lot of hard time and, to save up for retirement. And now suddenly I don't need that money for retirement. It's like, this technology is going to take away why I need so much money, And I hope that's the case, right? I mean, I hope it is. But, it's just, the irony here is, who owns all the recreation property, who owns all the lake and the waterfront property and everything else? It's the baby boomers again. right? They've retired, they've cashed their chips in, and they bought all the recreation properties, and they're going to make out like bandits again. God dang it. So if you're a millennial, maybe you'll inherit it from your baby boomer parents. So, all right, that's all I got. Thanks for listening. Yep. Okay. So I did cover that one. I'm just looking at the notes again. I will pick up this conversation again later. If you listen to this and it's not live, go ahead and add your thoughts into the comments. I mean, this is just anyone's guess at this point, but I think it's worth the conversation and worth speculating on what the best play is right now, because I do think things are changing. And, do I keep doing what I normally do? Am I that chicken that walks into the coop with the predator in there just because that's what I always do? And that's what chickens do, or am I going to think and say, hey, things change, this coop isn't safe anymore. Maybe I had to relocate. So just food for thought. I will talk to you later. Have a good one.